Let's practice identifying functional groups in the molecules shown here. So first we see an OH group, and I'm going to use my chart to be able to figure out the name of each functional group. So what is the name of a functional group that has an OH? If we look here, we see in red, you will see the functional groups. So if we see that we have an OH group attached to the rest of the molecule, this is called an alcohol. So we can circle this group, and this is going to be called an alcohol. Next, I see that I have a C double bond C. What is this functional group? A C double bond C is an alkene. So I am going to circle the C double bond C, and I'm going to name it alkene. Next, I see an oxygen. What is my oxygen attached to? This oxygen is attached to carbon on one side and carbon on the other side. So it's an oxygen in between two carbons. What functional group is that? Here we see that if we have an oxygen in between two R groups, two carbons, then it is going to be an ether. For example, here is an example of diethyl ether. Again, you see an oxygen in between two carbons. So this functional group will be an ether. Next, I see a cyclohexane ring with 3 double bonds. This functional group is called, let's just scroll down. This is aromatic functional group, and the name of this ring is a benzene ring. So I'm going to circle this, and I'm going to label it as aromatic. And the next functional group that we have in this molecule is C double bond O, that is connected to an oxygen that's connected to another carbon. So let's look for functional groups that have C double bond O next to an oxygen. Here we see some C double bond O's, but they don't have an oxygen next to them. Here we see C double bond O with OH. I don't have a hydrogen, so this is not carboxylic acid. And instead, this would be an ester because it's a C double bond O connected to an oxygen that's connected to another carbon. For example, like in my example of ethyl acetate. So this functional group is called an ester. Moving on to the next molecule, let's go ahead and see what we have here. I have a C double bond O, and my carbon that has the double bond O is connected to a hydrogen on one side and a carbon on another side. So what functional group is that? If we look through the functional groups, we will see that here I have a C double bond O that's attached to a hydrogen on one side, and it will be a carbon on another. This is called an aldehyde. So let's go ahead and label this as aldehyde. Next, I see a nitrogen that's attached to a C double bond O. So what functional group is that? C double bond O attached to a nitrogen, and the nitrogen could be attached to other groups such as carbons or hydrogens. It's called an amide. So this functional group will be amide. Finally, I see another nitrogen here, but this time it's not attached, it's not next to a C double bond O, it's just a nitrogen. So what functional group would that be? Let's see, can I find it? Here it is. So a nitrogen that is attached to 3 other groups, it could be usually carbons. In our case, it's attached to 2 carbons and 1 hydrogen. It's called an amine. For example, diethylamine is an example here, nitrogen that's attached to 2 carbons and a hydrogen. Or you could have nitrogen that would be attached to 2 hydrogens and a carbon. That would be an amine as well. So this functional group is called an amine.